It probably hasn't escaped you by now that Wyll is a warlock, even if he's reluctant to admit it. But what exactly is a warlock in D&D, and how does one become a warlock, and is Wyll even a typical warlock? To an outside observer, or one who's not well versed in the arcane arts, a warlock is just another funny wizard, an odd fellow who flails his arms about and makes magical things happen. And whilst it's true that warlocks wield magic, their magic is quite distinct from and dissimilar to the magic of wizards in some key ways. You might have also heard that warlocks require patrons, with whom they forge their pacts. And yes, that is true. So if that's the case, does that make warlocks like clerics, who rely on deities for their spells? Not exactly. In many ways, warlocks break the mold of the traditional idea of arcane magic versus divine magic, because of how they acquire their power. Warlocks do not study magic in a way a wizard would to memorize and acquire spells, nor, despite having a patron, are they granted spells through prayer. The warlock exists somewhere in between these modes of magic. In order for someone to become a warlock, that individual must forge a pact with a powerful being, and if agreed upon, the patron in question grants the warlock knowledge and power they otherwise would not have access to. Generally speaking, patrons are very careful about sharing knowledge and forging pacts with warlocks, because doing so is more often than not a one-way street. Unlike a deity that can simply revoke magic on a whim and refuse to grant further spells to the cleric in question, the Warlock's Pact symbolizes the transference of knowledge rather than prayer, and therefore, in the rare instances when a pact is broken, usually on the warlock side, the powers and knowledge the warlock has gained are retained. Patrons are often very powerful and experienced, so no one should get it into their heads that breaking a warlock pact is a simple affair, even if the warlock retains his power. There will be a price to pay. Warlock patrons are immortal, powerful, and normally not benevolent, which is always something to consider before foolishly breaking a pact. All warlocks seek power, but some warlocks also seek knowledge and choose the path of the warlock to further this aim. But some have other motives and aims, such as revenge, and some simply wish to escape from intractable situations they find themselves in. In exchange for this pledge, the patron grants the warlock arcane knowledge and power, and the warlock is expected to serve the patron in some capacity. Though this relationship is often difficult to characterize, it often resembles that of a master and apprentice, though, depending on the moral and ethical inclinations of both the warlock and the patron, this relationship can vary in its details, with some being quite tyrannical, and others being far more benevolent. But I am, of course, speaking in generalities. The typical warlock's patron is an immensely powerful entity, though rarely an actual divine power. And there are several kinds of warlock pacts that differ both in the types of patrons they have and the powers they are endowed with. Contrary to popular belief, not all warlocks forge pacts with fiends, and one of the rarer types of warlock pacts is the Fae Pact, which is a pact made with a Fae being, most typically an Archfey. An Archfey is a unique Fae being that is nearly divine in power and influence, and occupies a special position amongst the Fae. Each Archfey has their own domain of concerns and interest, and they can vary greatly in attitude and moral inclinations. Some Archfey, such as Titania, the Fairy Queen, are generally regarded as being relatively benevolent, whereas others, such as the Prince of Frost, who wishes to plunge the world into endless winter, are rightly perceived as cruel and fickle. But regardless of the individual Archfey, a pact made with one conveys different benefits to those made under the auspices of, say, a fiend. This is most often seen in the type of abilities an Archfey-bound warlock is likely to make use of. Archfey warlocks typically focus on spells and magic of enchantment and illusion, such as fairy fire, sleep, charm person, and invisibility, and are usually more interested in manipulation and deception than outright destruction, and their motivations also sometimes differ from those who have traditionally darker patrons. And speaking of darker patrons, the most common types of pacts are those sworn to fiends, both demons and devils. Demonic warlock pacts are sometimes called dark pacts. They entail dealing with and forging a pact with a demonic entity, often a demon lord, but possibly simply a powerful demon as well. Now, just a little bit of lore about demons. Demons are not the same as devils, although both are thoroughly evil. A devil can, in his own convoluted way, be trusted to keep his word, because devils are extremely lawful, but demons are beings of absolute chaos, caring only for power, meaning that their word means nothing, and they care nothing for rules and regulations, which means dealing with demons is inherently more unpredictable than dealing with devils. That is reflected in dark pacts. Any mortal that attempts to deal with a demon is therefore arguably at greater risk than they would be when dealing with a devil, if only for the sheer unpredictability of such dealings, and demon lords such as Demogorgon, Grozit, and Orcus are frequently patrons of such warlocks. Dark Pact warlocks gain abilities that are often focused purely on destruction. Death, pain, rage, and poison are often the focal point of Dark Pact warlocks, and one of the most well-known incantations used by Dark Pact warlocks is something called Spiteful Glamour, which allows them to invade the mind of their victims and cause horrific pain and anguish. The other, in fact more common fiendish pact is the pact offered by the devil. One very simple reason for this is that devils are creatures of law and formality, and as such, they at least appear more approachable than chaotic and unpredictable demons, and fickle and whimsical fae. Devils often approach mortals with terms of service, and this can make them seem more reliable than the alternatives, at least ostensibly. Devils will ultimately deliver on what they promise, whereas with the demon, it might just as well be a coin toss. This seeming reliability is of course undergirded by a labyrinthine complexity, deception, doublespeak, and fine print, so the quote-unquote safety of infernal warlock pacts is very much an illusion. And far more often than with other pacts, infernal pacts often require the overt sacrifice of one's soul, yet another liability when it comes to dealing with devils. Archdevils are the most common patrons of Infernal Pact warlocks, and whatever they trade for their power, they receive much in return, as they can wield the very power of the hells itself, conjuring and manipulating fire and flame as if it were second nature to them, among many other gifts. The converse of the Fiend Pact is the Celestial Pact. Such warlocks bind themselves to a powerful being of the upper planes, such as a Solar or Kirin, in order to gain both knowledge, but also insight into the powers of good, and so it should come as no surprise that Celestial Pact warlocks are overwhelmingly of good alignment, and seek to aid others. Their abilities entail healing, light, and providing aid to the world, but also the projection of radiant energy, and powers that harm evil. This type of pact, however, is very rare. But not all warlock pacts are with concrete, tangible beings. Some warlock pacts draw upon unknown and poorly understood sources of power. These pacts are often called star pacts and involve the patronage of beings from the far realm. The far realm is a place of weirdness and madness, and is inhabited by unspeakable horrors and aberrations. And it is with such beings that star pacts are forged. Some of these beings are ancient elder evils, primordial beings that sometimes even predate the gods. Sometimes these are referred to as Great Old Ones. The inscrutable nature of such entities is such that many Star Pact warlocks often do not know exactly what they are dealing with, because the point of contact is often made via celestial bodies, hence the name, Star Pact. Select stars act as partial conduits to ancient aberrations and elder evils, but more often than not, the warlock tapping into such power is only partially aware of the true nature of these beings, as such entities are far worse than any Fae or Fiend. Warlocks of this stripe gain eldritch powers not afforded to others of their ilk, and they possess abilities and spells granting them power over madness, horror, and fear. The Hex Blade is yet another of the rarer warlock archetypes, and they make pacts with mysterious entities from the Shadowfell. Though just as often, Hex Blades are empowered by weapons they discover, forged from the very stuff of the Shadowfell. They have the ability to infuse their weapons with eldritch power, and possess martial prowess that is uncommon to other warlocks, and are the most upfront and in-your-face of all warlock archetypes. Yet another type of pact that is extremely rare is the Undying Pact. As you might guess, the Undying Pact typically involves acquiring an undead patron, though this is not exclusively the case. Powerful liches are the most common patrons of Undying Pact warlocks, and unsurprisingly, the abilities they gain make them resemble the undead and grant them powers that are most typical of undead beings. Undying Pact warlocks are often motivated by a fear of dying, which drives them to seek knowledge from the undead. Other types of pacts exist, of course, such as genie pacts, but they are far less common than the ones I've mentioned. Now the real question, as it relates to Baldur's Gate 3, is how many of these subclasses will be available in the finished product, and we just don't know. But only going by the 5th edition Player's Handbook, we will have the Fiend, the Great Old One, and the Archfey, at the very least. Broadly speaking, warlocks fall into two groups, irrespective of their pacts: those who take a more subtle approach to things, and those who prefer more direct methods. More subtle warlocks are often called deceptive warlocks, and tend to specialize in magic and powers that manipulate and befuddle. More often than not, they've made pacts with Archfey, or Great Old Ones. The other type that favors direct methods is often called a Scourge Warlock, and they tend to have demonic or infernal patrons, but it also includes entities of the far realm. Their abilities focus on direct damage and destruction, eschewing subtlety. Why an individual warlock would choose the path of the warlock can vary, and some races are more inclined towards warlock pacts than others. As tieflings have infernal or demonic blood, many warlocks are in fact tieflings, and when they engage in fiendish pacts, then it is often with the understanding that they are embracing their true nature. Ambitious and daring, humans will often pursue warlock pacts as well, as do male drow and half-orcs. Other races feature much more rarely as warlocks, but it does happen. As for motivation, there really are only two types, though all seek power. Some are interested in acquiring knowledge and understanding, and are inquisitive, and others simply want the power to do things they seek to achieve. Wyll almost certainly falls into the latter category. Wyll obviously wants power, but not because he is bloodthirsty or he seeks to dominate and destroy others as a primary goal, but rather because of his insecurity and his thirst for vengeance. Wyll does not strike me as desirous of knowledge, or as someone who seeks arcane secrets. No, he wishes to be something he is not, a brave man and hero, and his Warlock Pact helps him facilitate that deception both towards himself and others, even if deep down he is well aware that he is none of the things he pretends to be. There is another issue with Wyll and his pact though, and that is the deception involved. We are told that Mizora, his Cambion patron, presented herself as a human woman, and only after agreeing to the pact, or at the very least expressing willingness, does she reveal her true nature. This rather flies in the face of traditional infernal pacts, which on their face are rather upfront. Just to say, usually, a would-be warlock knows full well that he's cutting a deal with the devil. The other somewhat iffy matter is the fact that Mizora is a mere Cambion, and one that has been captured by the Mind Flayers at that. She is simply not that powerful. Now, there is one instance of a warlock I can think of that also had a Cambion as a patron. One that accidentally fell into a pact with a Cambion, in fact, called Lorcan. But such things are few and far between, and I wouldn't say that sets a precedent. And so, it certainly feels like Larian has taken certain liberties with Wyll. The vast majority of warlock pacts take place at a conscious level, and with beings far more powerful than a simple Cambion. Although to be fair, as I always say, we are in early access, and thus, it's unlikely we have the entire story of Wyll and what the details were of his pact. But based on the little information we do have, it seems unusual, to say the least. Hopefully, he turns out to be more interesting than the current picture of him that has been painted. As always, thank you for tuning in. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, as it really helps out the channel, and I will check you out later. Take care.